In this video, I set out on a grand adventure through the Rocky Mountains of Canada with a group of adventure bikes to seek high and low for the answer to one simple question. Is this an adventure bike? I can hear it now.
That's not an adventure bike, mate. That's a flippin' dirt bike, mate.
If that's what you said, I'd probably have to agree with you. When I think of an adventure bike, there's a few things that come to mind. 2 cylinders, an 18 and a 21-inch wheel, 450 to 550 pounds, good ground clearance, seat height, a bunch of horsepower, $15,000 to $30,000, and enough accessories to make a Harley-Davidson dealership jealous. So what does the KTM 500exc have to offer in terms of an adventure bike? Well, to start, the 500exc is missing a cylinder and it vibrates enough that I could stick it in the mall and charge $1. The seat is high enough to induce a nosebleed, and the owner's manual wants you to swap the oil so often America might need to show up and give you a taste of freedom. But I wanted to join in on an adventure bike ride with my friends, and it was my 500 or my XL 100. And that bike is having some much needed rest after an intensive week of adventuring. That video will be coming out soon, so if you're not already subscribed, you should probably subscribe if you don't want to miss it. So I packed up the 500 as light as I could and joined in with my adventure bike friends. They were mostly riding Teneres and a couple Africa Twins, and one little CRF Itchy Boots. We would be on the road 5 nights traveling a 50-50 mix of highway and dirt, exploring old railway routes and mountain passes of southern British Columbia. This would be a perfect test for me to decide if the 500 can hack it as an adventure bike, or if it should be relegated back to the trails where it belongs. It may be wise at this point in the video to point out that everyone has a scale of what they find comfortable, and my scale is a little skewed. My biggest trip to date was across Canada on a 40-year-old KZ 440 that could barely do the speed limit and broke down approximately 35 to 4,000 times. And eventually, after 7,500 kilometers of punishment, it exploded a large hole through the block, leaving me stranded. And I still look back at that trip fondly. Me and my friend Riley also run an event called the Little Bike Big Adventure, where we take bikes like the XL 100 or the TW 200 and pretend they are adventure bikes. I don't say this as some strange struggle brag, but rather to give context in regards to using a bike like the 500 as an adventure bike. Now as for the bike itself, it is very obviously not stock, and the idea of riding this bike in its stock form without some mods is honestly too hardcore for me. My butt is a good place to start in the regards to upgrades.
Could you flex the rump a little more? I would like a little more rumpage.
This bike is equipped with the Seat Concepts tall seat, because the bike wasn't already tall enough. The Seat Concepts is a huge upgrade over stock, but in my opinion still leaves me wanting more. And that's where this stead animal comes in. Made by a company called Alaska Leather. I have used sheepskins for years, and I will always swear by them. As per fuel range, the stock bike comes with a tiny tank for trail riding. I have added the Atribis 5-gallon tank, and it can get me close to 400 kilometers. Surprisingly, out of all the adventure bikes, the 500 was the most fuel efficient. I also have larger aftermarket foot pegs, Rox bar risers, a big old rally light that I am in the middle of modifying for a new lighting system, so for this trip it was almost useless. I found a cheap windshield on Amazon that fit it perfectly and gave me amazing wind protection. This bike is a 2013 model, and there's a couple things to note about the 2013 to 16 models. Firstly, they are the last 500s to have kickstart and electric start. A nice option to have if you are stuck with a dead battery. This generation also holds more oil than the newer models, and it is also equipped with a rear aluminum subframe versus the new 500s with a plastic subframe. I'm not saying the plastic won't hold my luggage, but the metal gives me more confidence in mounting my giant Loop Coyote bag.
What the hell is even that?
I also adjusted my gearing so it's 1548 now, and at 100 kilometers an hour it just puts along and the vibrations are much less. As far as power mods, this bike has a titanium exhaust system and an aftermarket ECU that gets rid of all those factory plugged up tunes. With my taller gearing, the T7 was definitely still faster, but not a huge difference. As we headed west, we started to hear about more and more out-of-control fires burning through British Columbia and Alberta. When we checked the fire map, we saw that it had exploded with fires over the last 2 days. Our original route had us crossing mountain passes right through the evacuation-ordered areas. So as we rolled into Okanagan in plus 42-degree heat, we had to plan another route. Last thing we wanted was to get stuck somewhere because of road closures or get in the way of firefighters. After much poring over maps, we came to the conclusion that we were left with no other options other than retracing our steps back the way we came. And before you yell at me for not wearing protective gear, please notice the fully armored jacket strapped to the back of my bike. Honestly, the idea of rerunning the route the way we came was anything but disappointing. This area is incredible, and the slower return pace gave me more time for filming opportunities. And if you're wondering how I am enjoying the 500 as an adventure bike up to this point, maybe this will give you a hint.
This is amazing. When I say lightweight ATV bike, this is what's in my head. I want to do thousands of kilometers like this, on my crop on the bike, on a lightweight bike, a big fuel range. This is what I want to do. I love it. Keep your highways, keep your freeways. I don't want it. I want adventure. I want to see the country like this. Sorry, I'm yelling.
In case you couldn't tell, I was enjoying myself. I mean, look at this place. Who wouldn't be? This section of the Canadian Pacific Railway line was repurposed for recreational use and boasts some pretty awesome sights. This trail runs from Castlegar to Christina Lake and is open to pretty much everything from hikers to jeeps. The terrain is no more difficult than any dirt road, minus one spot that had recently washed out. And one of the biggest draws for this trail is the tunnels. And the most impressive of these tunnels is the Bulldog Tunnel. This tunnel is almost a full kilometer in length and has a sharp turn at the end. When you approach from the east, no light can be seen at the other end, and it gives you the feeling that it will never end. It takes over a minute and a half to ride through the tunnel, and roughly a minute and 29 seconds for your eyes to adjust to the darkness. Make sure you take your sunglasses off before you enter. The tunnel cools the air like an air conditioner and created an amazing spot to take a break from the heat and eat some lunch. And of course, ride back and forth through the tunnel a few times. I do think it's important to talk about the reliability of the 500s. Like a lot of people, I assumed this bike would not be a machine that was designed to take a lot of miles. But once I started looking around online, my opinion changed. There are a few examples of these bikes being ridden around the world, and the owners of these round-the-world machines are reporting incredible reliability. Aaron Steinman did over 140,000 kilometers on his pretty much stock 500. He rebuilt the head at 76,000 kilometers as a precaution, not as a necessity. He spent 3 years on the 500 exploring the world. People riding these bikes, like adventure bikes, are changing their oil at around 1,500 to 3,000 kilometers, and the oil changes are very easy and fast. And my personal experience with the 500 has proven to be a very positive one. Despite being a 10-year-old Baja bike, it has been perfectly reliable for me. And overall, this bike is pretty simple. No driver aids, ABS, or anything like that. The technology is there where I want it, with the suspension, the tuning, the fuel injection, but this bike can be worked on without a NASA degree in rocket surgery. And the biggest plus for me is the weight. My bike loaded up is pretty much half the weight of the Africa Twin loaded up. And that gives me a lot more confidence off-road. I can react to things quicker, I can stop faster, and I have zero concerns about picking the bike up all day long if I had to. And it just makes the bike a lot funner for me to ride off-road. And it's a lot of fun in the twisties too. I know the Africa Twin is 100 times more enjoyable for highway use, and if that's what you like to ride, then don't ever buy a 500 for this type of thing. You will hate it. Before this trip, I did spend some time wondering if I would regret taking the 500 on a trip like this, especially with a bunch of adventure bikes. But I never found myself looking at my friends' bikes with envy. I was just happy to be on the 500. I think everyone was happy with their machines and fully enjoying themselves. I know the 500 can handle any single track I can throw at it without a problem, and knowing that it can handle adventure riding is pretty awesome. But there is one nagging question left in my head: a 500exc or this?